there is a room that people dare not speak of aloud. On its walls are traces of maps, erased and redrawn by other hands. On the floor lies a broken compass, its stubborn arrow pointing northward, to the place where the wind breaks the trees, where rivers begin their run. In this room rests an old scroll. Its words do not die, they awaken the moment they are spoken. It is the book of Daniel. It does not speak in calendars but in the rhythm of a heartbeat. And each beat is a sign, a seal, an echo of footsteps marching from the north. When empires argue, they argue in the language of swords. But when prophecy speaks, the sword becomes a compass. The army from the north is not merely troops descending, it is the rhythm of cold pressing into the warm valleys where people once gathered grain and sang. It comes like snow in August, impossible, and yet real. Its path is long, and in every century it bears a new name. But the principle remains, the king of the north stretches forth his shadow, and the shadow grows faster than the blade. In Daniel's visions, horns rise and fall, kingdoms follow one another like masks upon a stage, yet the face of power is always recognizable. It is cold, precise, collected. It speaks the language of railways and sieges, but even more so the language of worship. For the end is not decided by the number of armies, but by the one to whom they bow. And so, at the center of the map is not a fortress of steel, but a sanctuary. Not a headquarters, but a throne. But what if the army from the north is already here, not as tank columns, but as codes and narratives rewriting your memory? What if the cold has entered not your city but your feet, your conscience, your yes and no? I see that the final battles are born not at borders, but in the language we use to describe the world. In Daniel's book, changes of kingdoms march side by side with changes of symbols. Babylon had its colors and beasts, Media its own, Greece still others. Yet all shared one conviction, history belonged to them. Prophecy shatters that certainty. It declares, history does not belong to empire. History belongs to the one who sets the boundary of the sea. The watchman on the walls whispers, listen to the cold. It comes without shouting. First economic pressure, like winter cutting off warmth. Then informational whirlwinds, where truth imitates itself. Like a twin. Then ritual engineering, changing even the language of worship, what is called sacred. What is dismissed as obsolete. And then the army from the north no longer stands outside the city, but within the temple of the heart, asking, to whom do you truly bow? I need no maps to see the direction. It is enough to follow the channels of power, where oil turns into sanctions, where cables carry not only data but prayers and fears. It is enough to hear how the cities speak, those that were once gateways of empires. Their squares know the sound of imperial footsteps. They have heard it many times. And always from the north came something that sought to teach the south new words of submission. The symbol today is the compass blade. Its tip points north, yet each time you try to draw a course, it slices your palm. The price of knowledge is blood, the price of ignorance, a yoke. Between these two paths stretches the fragile thread of prophecy. Daniel does not give us fixed dates, he gives us rhythms. Within them are seasons of rise and fall, seal after seal, sign after sign, until the hour comes to weigh the heart. When we say final battles, we imagine fire and smoke. But the true beginning is the silence. Before them, when the names of virtues change, when loyalty is called fanaticism, and betrayal is praised as wisdom. That is the northern wind, sharp and desert dry, that empties wells and drains voices. And at that moment one word echoes, Jerusalem. For in Daniel's book, as in human memory, Jerusalem is the starting point of worship. Whom the city bows to, the empire follows. Modern voices whisper otherwise, bow to efficiency, bow to survival, bow to the peace that can be purchased. But prophecy asks differently, what will become of your soul if, for the sake of peace, you agree to turn the compass where another's blade directs? This is not politics. This is the question of the throne within your heart. And here begins the geopolitics of prophecy. The army of the North enters where loyalty proves dearer than life. One may argue about borders and alliances, but not with the echo of symbols. It always returns. What we call the North was the same for Egypt, for Judah, for Rome, a network of roads leading empires to the sanctuaries of other peoples. And each empire believed that this time it would rewrite heaven. But heaven is not rewritten. It is read. So listen once more, the army from the North is not only armies. It is the sign of an age when cold takes the shape of law, and silence the shape of consent. And here, in this room with the old scroll, we understand the core truth. The last battles are battles over the meaning of words. If the sacred can be renamed by decree, then the blade is already within the temple. But if the sacred resists every decree, then the compass blade points to another pole, the pole of faithfulness, which does not melt even in the harshest winter. We will follow Daniel's path further. We will see how the king of the North changes masks, how maps unfold, and how Jerusalem becomes not just a city but a knot of time. We will test the symbols, decode the signs, and ask the greatest question, if the army of the North is not only them but also us, when we choose cold profit over burning truth, then is it not time to shift the compass? That is why, in this series, we will speak of Daniel's book, of the last battles, of the king of the North, of symbols, of Jerusalem, of the geopolitics of worship. We will not name dates. We will name signs. And signs either save, or they destroy. There is an image that drifts through the pages of Daniel's book like a shadow that changes shape, but never disappears. It is the King of the North. His name is different in every age, his face shifts with crowns, helmets, and titles. Yet his role never changes. He always comes from the cold side of the map, from the place where the wind cuts and the night outlasts the day. Within this image lies an archetype, a power rising to challenge the warmth of the sanctuary. In Daniel's account we read of kings clashing, of the North against the South, of long wars and betrayals. But behind the text lies more than geography. These are not merely directions of the compass. They are two programs of history. The North embodies cold logic, mechanical power, instrumental calculation. The South embodies the warm pulse, the sanctuary, the space of worship. And every time the Northern king raises an army, he tries to replace the pulse of the heart with the chill of iron. The secret is that the role of the King of the North is never tied to one person. People change. Dynasties fall. But the role remains. It is like a theatrical mask worn by different actors, yet the voice behind it sounds the same. The mask is cold, iron-bound. It hides the human face, leaving only the function, to rule, to conquer, to expand the shadow. Modernity knows this mask no less than antiquity. States that build empires wear it, even without naming them as such. Corporations wear it, their glowing logos burning brighter than ancient crests. Alliances wear it, shifting political landscapes without ever needing crowns. The mask does not belong to the person, it belongs to the system. And here arises the conflict: can the individual resist the role? History offers examples of rulers who tried to take the mask off. They saw that the cold face carried not only power but also a curse. Yet the system proved stronger. The mask clung to them like a second skin, and in time they became its prisoners. The northern ruler in biblical perspective is always more than human. He is legalized cold force, arriving at the moment when nations grow weary of their own freedom and are ready to trade it for order. This logic repeats: wherever people fear chaos, they open the door to the King of the North. For cold discipline seems easier than burning loyalty. The symbol of this episode is the iron mask. It presses upon the face, muffles the voice, but makes obedience sharp and clear. It guarantees stability, but at the cost of human breath. And every time history places this mask on a new face, another version of the Northern King appears. The modern world shows how this mask works not only in politics but in corporations and ideologies. Massive systems built on calculation outlast their leaders. An empire may lose its dictator, yet its machinery endures. A corporation may replace its CEO, yet its profit engine runs on. The mask remains on stage even when the actor vanishes. And so the question, what weighs more, the human heart or the role? Can a person under this mask remain faithful to the warmth of the sanctuary? Is it possible to wear an iron mask and not become iron oneself? This dilemma has no simple answers. Daniel's prophecies push us to realize, this is not just a historical chronicle but a rhythm of repetition. Every time a northern power rises, we see the same mask. And we know another conflict lies ahead. But it is not only about states and armies. It is about us. For the mask can appear in our own lives, when we surrender truth for convenience, when the cold logic of advantage overcomes the burning heart of loyalty. The modern parallels are striking. Look at geopolitical alliances, still moving forward by inertia, even when nations are weary of war. Look at economic structures, dictating laws regardless of changing governments. Look at tech giants, shaping culture faster than parliaments. Are these not iron masks? Is this not the logic of the Northern King, continuing though the actors change? History warns us, the mask never falls on its own. It clings until the very end, until a greater force comes to shatter it. But who is that force? Can a human remove the mask alone? Or must we wait for the one who comes with fire, to melt the iron away? This image compels reflection. How willing are we to wear our own masks? Do we not become part of the army of the North when we choose cold utility over burning truth? Do we not surrender freedom when we agree that order is worth more than justice? And if so, are we not ourselves the makers of a new Northern King? The army of the North in Daniel's vision is not merely a literal army. It is the constant shadow, appearing whenever nations tire of the fight for truth. And this shadow always searches for a new face for its mask. In this picture, Jerusalem again becomes the center. For the sanctuary alone decides whether a person endures the cold or accepts the mask. In this struggle lies not only the fate of kings but the fate of souls. The iron mask remains a warning. It reminds us, the role can destroy the person if he fails to discern where order ends and slavery begins. History shows, empires fall, yet the role of the Northern King returns. We enter the rhythm where yet another actor dons the cold iron. And again we face the question, is this already happening today? Are we ready to recognize the mask before it becomes our second face? Daniel's prophecies are not only words about the past. They are echoes sounding in the present. And each generation must decide, will it submit to the cold role of the Northern King, or choose another way? The transition to the next episode is inevitable. If symbols shape the maps of power, then we must understand the mechanics of those signs. For within them lies the hidden code of the final battles. Prophecy always speaks in the language of symbols. It does not draw simple maps or name specific rulers and borders. It leaves signs, horns, seals, directions, the sound of trumpets. For some these are riddles, for others allegories. But for those who learn to hear the rhythm of history, they are a map, not geographic, but spiritual, a map of power and worship that reveals not only the past but also what is drawing near. In Daniel's book, kingdoms rise and fall through images, beasts with iron teeth, horns that grow and break, seals that guard mysteries until the appointed time. These images startle and frighten, for They resemble dreams. And yet they are structural, repeating like formulas. They are not chaos or fantasy, they are a system of signs. And to understand how the army from the north operates, one must first grasp the mechanics of these symbols. The horn in biblical tradition is always a sign of power, of authority, of the ability to raise nations and summon them to battle. When the horn sounds, it is not merely noise, it is a signal gathering armies, breaking silence, shifting direction. In Daniel's visions, horns are kings and kingdoms, rising one after another. But there is a deeper truth: horns are always multiple. One horn rises, another falls, then several more appear. This means power is never permanent. It passes, it transfers, like a torch in the dark. But the light of this torch is not always pure. Seals speak of something else, the preservation of a mystery until its moment. The text says, "Seal up the words until the time of the end." This means that even if a symbol is revealed, its meaning may remain hidden. And then a new age comes, the seal is broken, and suddenly what seemed like metaphor becomes reality. What once sounded like a dream becomes today's headline. Directions in Daniel's account carry geopolitical meaning. North and south, east and west are not just points of the compass but scenarios of history. The northern king and the southern king symbolize opposing poles, rhythms colliding again and again. Thus when we speak of the army from the north, we speak not only of geography but of a principle, the cold advance against the warm heart. How does this mechanic work today? The world is filled with horns sounding daily. They may be political slogans rallying people under banners. They may be media campaigns dividing nations into camps. They may be economic sanctions forcing countries to submit. These are the trumpets of modernity, horns that summon not only to war but to obedience. Sometimes they roar so loudly they drown out the voice of the individual. Seals have not vanished either. Their role today is even clearer. Hidden agreements become public. Classified documents are suddenly leaked. Information long sealed under secret emerges for all to see. Each time we realize the seal has been broken, the hour has come. And there are spiritual seals as well, the moment when words once familiar suddenly blaze in a heart as though they were written today. This too is the breaking of a seal. Directions in our age also speak loudly. We see blocks of nations positioning themselves against one another, new alliances forming around resources and borders. North and south, east and west are no longer mere coordinates but configurations of power shaping the world's future. And here the question rises: where does your compass point? Toward the sanctuary, or toward the iron throne of the northern king? The mechanics of signs hold another deep truth: symbols move in waves. They repeat on every scale, from global history to the life of a single person. The horn may sound in your soul when the outside world demands submission. The seal may break when an old word suddenly reveals its meaning to you. The direction may change when you decide your path will follow not the cold of the north but the light of truth. This is the parallel between biblical visions and our world. Today's world resounds with the horns of media, the seals of politics, the directions of geopolitics. Each presses upon us, forcing choices, shaping the battlefield. But the core truth is this: symbols always lead to worship. Whom you bow to, he becomes your king. The symbol of this episode is the horn beacon. It is not only a horn that sounds, but one that amplifies, broadcasting signals of power, carrying them further, making them inescapable. It is like the antenna of our age, transmitting messages endlessly until you forget where your own voice is. This horn beacon teaches us, power lies not only in armies but in signals, in narratives shaping the mind. And so comes the central question: can we discern the true signal from the false? Can we hear the voice from heaven amid the clamor of 1,000 earthly trumpets? For this is the battle of the last days, the struggle to recognize symbols. Daniel's prophecies do not hand us simple maps. They give us a system of signs to read. And whoever can read them sees not only the past but the path of the future. For symbols repeat, and in repetition lies their power. Modern empires, like the ancient ones, use this very mechanic. They craft horns that blare through screens. They place seals on knowledge, opening it only when useful. They dictate directions in world politics, steering nations where they choose. Yet above all remains the greater question, do you see the sign pointing to the sanctuary? For at the end Jerusalem always stands. It is the knot of time, the point that decides everything. And to it converge all horns, all seals, all directions. The mechanics of signs is the mechanics of the battle for the soul. It is not only about nations and empires, it is about each person. For if you do not understand how a symbol works, it works against you. But if you learn to read the rhythm, then even in the roar of trumpets you will hear the quiet voice that leads to truth. The world stands at the threshold of final battles. And now is the time to learn the reading of signs. For the horn already sounds, the seals are cracking, the directions align. And all of it presses one question: will you recognize the voice of truth amid the roar of the army from the north? There are cities that live for commerce, for culture, for empire. And there is one city that lives for memory. Jerusalem does not stand at the crossroads of trade or armies but at the crossroads of time. Its stones are witness stones. They remember not only the voices of prophets but also the shouts of conquerors, the prayers of pilgrims, and the silence of ruins. Every empire that came here thought, if we hold Jerusalem, we hold history itself. Yet prophecy declares the opposite: whoever holds Jerusalem is judged by it. From the days of David and Solomon, the city bore the sign of a sanctuary. The temple was not just a building of stone, it was a pulse, the heart of worship. When Nebuchadnezzar burned it, when Titus leveled it, the world thought, the story is over. But the city rose again, for Jerusalem is not only architecture but destiny. It is the knot where the threads of heaven and earth are tied together. Daniel's visions always return here. The armies of the north and the south clash, yet the line of their conflict always cuts through Jerusalem. For the question is not merely who rules territory but to whom the city bows. Jerusalem is the stage where history asks, who is king, not only of land, but of hearts? The symbol of this episode is the witness stone. In ancient Israel, stones marked covenants, stood as reminders of promises and warnings. Jerusalem itself is such a stone. Every empire that strikes it leaves a crack in its own foundation. Every conqueror that marches through its gates writes not his triumph but his judgment. The city does not belong to them, it belongs to the one who placed his name there. Modern history shows the same pattern. World powers sign agreements, redraw borders, form alliances, yet Jerusalem remains the axis of tension. Religious disputes, political claims, even global negotiations cannot erase its role. The city stands as a knot of time, to touch it is to touch prophecy. This is why Jerusalem is never only about geopolitics. It is about worship. The prophecy says, the sanctuary will be desecrated, the daily sacrifice will be stopped. This is more than ritual, it is the battle over meaning. For whoever controls worship controls the direction of history. The armies from the north understood this. They marched not just for land but for the temple. The Romans proved this when they carried away the golden lampstand. The message was clear: to break the sanctuary is to break the people. Yet prophecy whispers differently: the sanctuary may fall, but it will rise again. For its foundation is not human hands but divine decree. Modern cities glitter brighter: New York, London, Beijing. Yet none of them carries the same weight of destiny. They are centers of trade, culture, politics. Jerusalem is the center of prophecy. It is a mirror showing humanity not what it builds but whom it worships. The question, then, is not, who owns Jerusalem? The true question is, who does Jerusalem witness against? For every generation the city raises the same mirror. Empires come, empires go. But Jerusalem remains the knot of time, the stage of prophecy, the witness stone against all who would rewrite heaven. And so the path of prophecy circles here again. Daniel points us to this city not as a relic of the past, but as the pulse of the future. For when the army from the north moves, it always aims at Jerusalem. And the fate of nations is measured not by their power but by their response to this city of memory. The knot of time tightens. The witness stone waits. And once more history asks its question, who is king, not of walls and gates, but of worship, of loyalty, of the heart? History turns on an unseen axis. Not on the axis of trade, not on the axis of war, but on the axis of worship. Empires come and go, armies rise and fall, but the true weight of history is measured at the sanctuary. Daniel's vision shows us this truth in the form of a statue made of many metals. It is the image of the world, layered with kingdoms, gold, silver, bronze, iron, and finally clay mixed with iron. The vision is not only a chronicle of empires. It is the map of destiny, showing the fragility at the very foundation of human power. Babylon, the head of gold, glittered with splendor and brilliance, yet it fell to the pride of its rulers. Persia, the chest of silver, vast and organized, could not escape its divisions. Greece, the bronze body, swift and sharp, blazed across the map but faded with astonishing speed. Rome, the legs of iron, crushed nations with unmatched strength, but even iron cracked when set upon feet of clay. The message is clear: human kingdoms shine, but they do not endure. Their glory dazzles, but their foundations betray them in the end. The symbol of this episode is the axis of history itself. It is not geography, not politics, not the genius of leaders. It is worship, the allegiance of the heart. Every empire has tried to seize this axis, believing that if it could control the sanctuary, it could control destiny itself. Yet prophecy says otherwise. The sanctuary is not theirs to own. It belongs to the one who placed his name there. The statue is not only about the past. It is a prophecy for every age. Each empire rises convinced it is eternal, but its feet are already clay. The pattern repeats. Glory, expansion, triumph, then cracks. Collapse, ruin. And each time humanity forgets, it builds a new statue, taller, stronger, convinced it will last. But prophecy whispers, the axis does not move. The sanctuary remains the measure of all things. Modern empires follow the same path. Global powers build alliances, extend influence, lay down economic and military networks like iron girders across the world. They promise peace, order, prosperity. Yet under the surface are fractures, cultural divides, moral weakness, economic fragility. Feet of clay hidden beneath iron pride. The illusion of permanence cannot erase the prophecy. The statue always falls. The prophecy goes further. It tells of a final attempt, a last empire that will try to combine iron with clay, to force unity where unity cannot exist. It will appear stronger than all before, more global, more enduring. It will promise an order that cannot be broken. Yet Daniel declares, the mixture will not hold. The cracks will appear. The feet will fail. And the statue will collapse once again. The hope of the vision lies not in the metals but in the stone. The stone cut without hands strikes the feet of the statue, and the whole image falls, shattered beyond repair. That stone grows into a mountain filling the earth. It is the sign of a kingdom not made by human power, not built on iron or clay, but established by God Himself. This is the kingdom that does not fall, the kingdom that endures forever. The question for us is simple yet decisive: where's your trust? Do you cling to the shining metals of human empires, or to the stone that outlasts them all? Do you bow before the statue that dazzles, or to the kingdom that cannot be shaken? For prophecy does not only speak of kings and nations. It speaks of every heart, every life. The axis of history is not far away. It is in the choices of loyalty, made in the sanctuary of the soul. The world today builds its statues of glass towers and digital empires. It believes technology and wealth will give permanence. But prophecy unmasks the illusion. Feet of clay remain, fragile and unsteady. And the same stone still waits, the kingdom that cannot be overthrown. This is the message of Daniel: history is not chaos. It is rhythm. Empires fall, the axis remains. The sanctuary is the true center. And the last word does not belong to Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, or any modern empire. It belongs to the stone, to the kingdom eternal. So the prophecy presses the question on us today: will you entrust your future to iron and clay, or to the stone that grows into a mountain and fills the earth? For in the last battle of history, the axis will turn once more. And its turning will reveal not just the fate of empires, but the allegiance of every heart. Empires rule not only with armies but with words. The battlefield of the last days is not only territory or resources, but consciousness itself. Daniel's visions reveal that when the sanctuary is desecrated and the daily sacrifice is stopped, the struggle has already moved from the gates into the heart. The altar is not only stone, it is language, the words that shape loyalty and redefine worship. Babylon once demanded that its captives learn a new tongue, sing its songs, and bow to its golden idol. Rome required odes and incense to Caesar, turning language itself into proof of loyalty. So, too today, the powers of the world create new vocabularies, codes, and slogans. They rename what is sacred, redefine what is true, and declare obedience in the form of words. For words become weapons, and silence becomes complicity. The symbol of this episode is language, the language of worship. Every empire knows that victory is secure only when people speak its words, repeat its creeds, and silence the speech of the sacred. If they cannot burn the sanctuary, they will redefine it. If they cannot silence prayer, they will replace it with new liturgies of compliance. And thus the tongue itself becomes the altar of allegiance. Modern parallels are clear. Governments, corporations, and media craft vocabularies that function like commandments, tolerance, progress, unity. Words with noble roots are reshaped into creeds of conformity. Social media platforms filter speech, algorithms amplify certain messages while burying others. The language of worship is rewritten in the code of machines, and the conscience of humanity is trained to echo the voice of empire. The danger is subtle. It does not always arrive with a golden statue or an imperial decree. It comes through shifts in words, the quiet redefinition of what may be spoken. Truth becomes hate. Faith becomes fanaticism. Conviction becomes extremism. And soon the vocabulary of empire is the only language left. This is how the battle for the mind is waged, not with swords, but with speech. Daniel's vision shows that the king of the north advances not only with iron, but with decrees and words that cut deeper than weapons. The conquest is not only of cities, but of conscience. And in this conquest, the altar is language itself, the power to define reality. For if the sacred can be renamed, then loyalty can be redirected, and worship can be stolen. The battle for the mind is the battle for the future. It asks not simply what army commands you, but what language shapes you. Do you repeat the words of empire, or the words of truth? Do you allow fear to dictate your speech, or do you hold to the language of the sacred? This is no small question. For the prophecy warns, those who surrender their tongue surrender their soul. History echoes this warning. The songs of Babylon, the decrees of Rome, the slogans of modern states, all remind us that language is never neutral. It is always an altar. It always reveals allegiance. And in the last days, prophecy declares, humanity will once more face the choice, to speak the words of truth at any cost, or to echo the language of empire for the sake of survival. The battle for the mind is already here. It is not fought only in parliaments or on battlefields, but in classrooms, in media, in homes. It is fought in the words we dare to say, and in the truths we refuse to abandon. The prophecy presses the question, what language will you speak when silence is demanded? The language of worship cannot be rewritten forever. For in the end, heaven's voice speaks once more, and no decree can silence the truth of the eternal kingdom. Thus this episode closes with the most intimate of battles, not of land or power, but of words and conscience. For the language of worship is the language of the soul. And whoever controls it shapes not only history, but eternity. The prophecies move toward their climax. Daniel and Ezekiel speak of a final conflict, a confrontation not only of armies but of voices. The king of the north does not simply advance with weapons, he advances with a voice amplified by empires, repeated by systems, echoed through the world. This voice demands allegiance. It calls not only for obedience of the body but for surrender of the heart. The final battle is more than tanks and missiles. It is the last act of history's drama, where words strike deeper than swords, and decrees weigh heavier than iron. The voice of the North promises stability, security, survival. It whispers that peace is possible if only loyalty is surrendered. And fear makes this whisper convincing. Many will yield, believing compromise is wisdom. But prophecy unmasks the truth, this voice is not new. It is the same voice that spoke in Babylon, in Rome, in every empire that demanded worship. It is an ancient voice recycled, rising one last time. With greater volume, greater reach, greater power. The symbol of this episode is the trumpet voice. It shakes nations not with sound but with authority. When it speaks, neutrality becomes impossible. Silence becomes agreement. The trumpet voice forces humanity to choose, not between nations, but between loyalties. And when it sounds, every soul must answer, whose voice will you follow? Modern parallels are unmistakable. Global communication systems flood the world with messages of conformity. News outlets, political speeches, digital networks spread one note in endless repetition, safety through submission, peace through compliance. The voice of the North today is less about soldiers and more about signals. It aims not only at borders but at minds. It is the voice of propaganda, the hum of algorithms, the echo of empire disguised as reason. Yet prophecy declares, this is not the final word. For when the trumpet of the North sounds, another trumpet will answer, from heaven. One voice commands fear, the other calls to trust. One builds empires, the other builds eternity. One demands bowing by decree, the other invites bowing by truth. The last battle is not only fought on the earth but in the conscience of every human being. Jerusalem again stands at the center. It becomes the stage of this drama, the axis of history. For the voice of the North will demand that the city bow, that the sanctuary be redefined, that worship be surrendered. But prophecy warns, Jerusalem cannot be conquered by armies or decrees. It belongs to the one who placed his name there, and every attempt to seize it writes judgment not against the city, but against the empire that dares. The climax of history is cosmic because it is about worship. Alliances will form, armies will rise. But the real contest is not over land, but over loyalty. The voice of the North seeks to redefine worship, to rename the sacred, to silence the truth by law. But prophecy assures us, another voice speaks. The voice that thundered at creation, the voice that still whispers in the conscience, the voice that cannot be silenced by decree. The question for every age becomes urgent in the last battle: which voice will you hear? The trumpet of fear or the voice of heaven? One fades with the fall of empires. The other endures forever. And though many will yield to fear, prophecy promises that some will stand. They will not bow, they will not echo the empire, they will remain faithful. Their resistance will appear foolish to the world, but it will be wisdom before eternity. The final battle is not only about armies or empires. It is about your own heart. Whose voice commands your choices? Whose trumpet do you follow? When the voice of the North grows loud, will you still hear the quieter call: stand firm, remain faithful, do not bow? This is the mystery of the last act. The trumpet of the North roars, the nations tremble, but prophecy declares the story does not end in fear. It ends in freedom. It ends with the voice of God, the voice that calls not into submission, but into life eternal. The final age of prophecy is not marked only by war, but by a chilling of the heart. Daniel's visions describe not merely armies, but laws that freeze compassion and decrees that replace truth with rules. It is written, lawlessness will increase, and the love of many will grow cold. When cold becomes law, the world does not simply lose warmth, it loses its soul. Empires have always used law as their shield and sword. Babylon had its decrees of worship, Rome its imperial edicts, every power declaring its commands absolute. But in the last days, prophecy reveals a deeper danger, not only unjust laws, but laws that sanctify injustice itself. When cold becomes law, the cruelty of empire wears the mask of legality, and obedience to fear is renamed as loyalty. The symbol of this episode is the frozen law. It is a law that no longer protects the weak, but punishes the faithful. It is a law that no longer measures justice, but demands conformity. It is law turned into ice, rigid, lifeless, merciless. It does not ask what is true. It only asks, will you obey? Modern parallels surround us. Nations write regulations that silence conscience. Corporations impose codes that redefine morality. Digital systems enforce algorithms as commandments, where every violation is recorded, judged, and punished. The law becomes an automated code, its sentences carried out not by judges but by machines. This is the new empire, legality without mercy, order without love. When code becomes law, worship itself is targeted. Faith is tolerated only within limits, only in private, only when silent. Prayers are dismissed as extremism, convictions are renamed as intolerance. The sanctuary is not burned, it is regulated. And in this regulation, the warmth of devotion is smothered by the chill of decree. The danger is not only oppression. It is acceptance. When people begin to see cold as normal, when cruelty wrapped in legality is mistaken for justice, then prophecy warns, the world stands on the brink. For laws may restrain behavior, but they cannot command love. And when love is absent, all that remains is compliance without conscience. Daniel's vision shows us that the army of the North advances not only with violence, but with statutes, contracts, signatures, treaties. Its conquest is written in ink as well as in blood. And its greatest triumph is not the fall of cities, but the freezing of hearts. For when cold becomes law, rebellion against empire feels like rebellion against order itself. Yet prophecy assures us, this is not the end. For another law exists, the law of life, the law of love. It does not come by decree, but by spirit. It does not freeze, but warms. It does not demand submission, but offers renewal. And it alone can outlast the cold decrees of empires. The question for us is urgent: what law governs your life? The frozen codes of empire, or the living law of heaven? Do you obey merely because fear commands it, or because love compels it? When cold becomes law, neutrality is no longer possible. Every choice reveals allegiance to the empire of ice or to the kingdom of life. This is the final warning of prophecy. When the world calls its coldness justice, when laws replace love, when conformity is mistaken for peace, then the stage is set for the end. But even in that darkness, the warmth of truth will not vanish. For the kingdom eternal cannot be frozen. It comes not with decrees of cold, but with the fire of renewal. Thus the story of this episode closes with the great paradox: empires may make cold their law, but heaven's law is love, and love cannot be legislated away. For when the coldest age arrives, the flame of eternity will burn all the brighter. History does not end with silence. It does not close with despair. It ends with a voice, with a promise, with a kingdom that cannot be shaken. The visions of Daniel and the prophets carry us through empires, through battles of worship, through the rise and fall of powers. But they do not leave us standing among ruins. They lift our eyes to a kingdom beyond ruin, a kingdom built not by hands, a kingdom eternal. The rhythm of prophecy is the rhythm of 7 seals, trumpets, thunders, bowls. It is the rhythm of trial and judgment, of collapse and renewal. But this rhythm does not fade into chaos. It resolves in harmony. The forbidden code, the northern armies, the frozen laws, all are fragments of the story. But the final chapter is not empire. It is eternity. It is the stone that struck the statue, growing into a mountain filling the earth. It is the new Jerusalem descending, the city of light, where every tear is wiped away. The symbol of this ending is not ruin, but renewal. Prophecy is not a cage. It is a key. It does not imprison us in fear, but unlocks the door to hope. Every vision that Daniel sealed finds its meaning here. For the kingdoms of men may crumble, but the kingdom of heaven endures. And its foundation is not iron, not clay, but love. Modern history leaves us restless. Empires promise peace, then deliver conflict. Nations offer order, then collapse in division. Systems dazzle with brilliance, then betray with fragility. But prophecy cuts through the illusion. It tells us history is not chaos, but story. Not accident, but rhythm. And its final word is not despair, but hope. The question, then, is not how the empires fall, but how we stand when they do. Where is your loyalty when the laws grow cold? Where is your worship when the voice of the north commands? Prophecy presses this question on every heart. What kingdom do you belong to? The fleeting kingdoms of men, or the eternal kingdom of God? The epilogue is not the end. It is the beginning. For when the scroll of history closes, another scroll opens. The sanctuary is restored, the throne is revealed, and the kingdom of love fills the earth. No decree can silence it, no empire can topple it, no cold can freeze it. It is the kingdom that cannot be shaken. So the story of prophecy closes not with a period, but with a door. A door open to eternity, to a city where light never fades and worship never ends. A city where history's wounds are healed, where every battle finds its resolution, and where the rhythm of 7 resolves in the song of forever. The choice stands before us even now. The empires call with their voices, the laws command with their decrees. But above them all a quieter voice still speaks, come. It is the voice of the kingdom eternal, the kingdom that endures, the kingdom that cannot be shaken.